Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another AAT Level 3 revision session. My name is Ben Bullman. I am a tutor and a director at First Intuition. This evening, we're going to be looking at a couple of tasks, one of them relevant for the Advanced Level 3 Synoptic assessment, particularly thinking tonight about some of the ethics areas of that syllabus. And then for the second part tonight, we will be looking at a spreadsheet task, preparing you hopefully for your advanced level 3 spreadsheet assessment. And remember, please, those are now two separate assessments that you would have to book separately with the AAT. So, as always, a bit of a health warning up front. The tasks that we use for this revision session are written by First Intuition. They are not official AAT sample assessments. You've got access to those, but the ones we're going to be looking at are ones that have been written by First Intuition. So they're not authorized by the AAT, but in my experience as a tutor, they should try and replicate and give you a good feel for some of the areas that you need to be familiar with before sitting the assessments. So our first task this evening, bit of a mini scenario just to place us in a context. It says Andrew has just started working at the accountant, where you work, and has asked you for a few questions about ethics. Please complete the questions below. And so we've got lots of different potential answers. In your AAT live assessment, these would be drop-down boxes that you could select for the relevant boxes to fill in. For this evening, guys who are watching the recording, you can shout out answers at the screen. For guys that are with me live this evening, and thank you for joining the live sessions again tonight, you can type your answers into the chat box, please, so we can get a bit of student participation and engagement. So there are the potential answers. Let's have a look at the questions. So question A, the first question tonight, who should money laundering be reported to within a firm? Who in the chat box can tell me who within a firm of accountants should a suspicion of money laundering be reported to? Everybody in the chat box is saying MLRO, or Money Laundering Reporting Officer. Well done, Becky. Well done, Heather and Jenna, I can see. Emma and Susanna have got the right answers. Sunfer, Angela has. Rasa has. That is fantastic. Brilliant. Yet the right answer for A should be the Money Laundering Reporting Officer. Well done if you got that one. Okay, moving on to question B. Which external body should money laundering be reported to? Share away in the chat box, guys. If you're watching the recording, have a think for yourselves. I'll scroll back up so you can see on the screen the potential answers. Who externally should we report money laundering to? Well, the correct answer for that one, and it's over here in the options, is the National Crime Agency, the NCA. Well done at home if you got that. I can see Rasa, Deb, well done, Deborah, Emma. Well done again, Gemma and Angela. Nice one, Becky, and plenty of others. Susanna's in there, Heather. Well done, everybody who said National Crime Agency. Yeah, they are the external body that we would report it to. Right, two of the answers this time relevant. So this time we are thinking, what are the two courses of legal action a client can bring against an accountant? So if an accountant has done something wrong, what legal action can their client bring against them? And for this one, there are two answers on the board. So in the chat box, please, or if you're playing at home, which two legal actions can a client bring against their accountant? Give you a moment to think about that one. If you are playing along at home, shout out the answer. If you're with me live this evening, you can use the chat box to share answers. I can see answers coming through from Heather, well done, from Becky, from Jenna, from Susanna, nice one. Well done, Manu, you've got one of them. Justina has as well, fantastic, well done, Liz. Yet the two courses of legal action that are on the board are breach of contract. So an accountant should have a contract legally with every one of their clients. That contract is commonly called an engagement letter. If ever you appoint an accountant, you would be asked to sign an engagement letter which sets out the terms of the contract between the firm and the client. And if something has not been done in accordance with that letter of engagement, that would be a breach of contract. So that would be a contract law issue. The other one is something that we call a law of tort, a legal term that means not requiring a contract, but an accountant can be sued by their client for negligence. So well done for question C if you got breach of contract as one answer and negligence as the second. Well done, guys. Lots of right answers in the chat box this evening, which I'm loving. Okay, on to question D. Question D says, state two potential actions a court can take against an AAT member being found guilty of fraud. So what can a court do to an AAT member if they are found guilty of fraud? And this is a court, a judge in a court case, not the AAT themselves. So two right answers on the board. I'll give you a moment to think about it. Use the chat box again, live audience, guys, this evening. What two actions can a court take for fraud against an AAT member? Oh, lots of good answers coming through. Too many for me to name everybody. Apologies, I can't mention everybody by name, but well done, Emma. Well done, Deborah. Justina, I can see. Heather. Nice one again, Jenna and Angela. Fantastic. Yep, the two actions. Well done, Monica. The two actions a court can take under civil or criminal action is one of them, they can sentence you to imprisonment. Fraud is a criminal offence, and so imprisonment is a potential sentence that a judge can issue out. The other one is a fine. So a court can fine you for your actions. So well done for question D this evening. Two potential actions a court can take against an AAT member being found guilty of fraud: imprisonment and fine. Okay, on to question E. What is the course of action a court can take against an AAT member being found liable for negligence? So negligence is now a civil claim. It's not a criminal action against the accountant. What can a judge in a civil case award for a successful claim for negligence? I'll give you the option screen again in case anybody's not got access to see that. So one of those is the award for a successful negligence claim. Which one would we go for? Not so many answers coming through on the chat box for this one, but a few right answers there. Well done, Rasa. Well done, Angela. Justina, I can see. Becky. Well done, Jenna. Yes, for a negligence claim, the judge can award what we call damages. Damages is a technical term for compensation for the loss of the other party. So in a civil case, a judge can award damages for negligence. Brilliant. Okay, the questions continue over the page. So question F, a client asks their accountant to produce their accounts and then audit them. State what safeguard the accountant should put in place if, 1, they can reduce the self-review threat to a suitably low level. So if your firm is asked to produce the accounts and then audit them, can anybody suggest a safeguard if they can reduce the self-review threat to a suitably low level? What could be a safeguard the firm could put in place? How could we get round the potential ethical issue of producing the accounts and then independently auditing them? Some question marks from people in the chat box, but those people really should have some more confidence. Becky, yeah, you were right. Well done. Emma, well done. Jenna, I can see. Justina again. Heather, fantastic. Separate teams was the one I was looking for the suitably low-level threat. So yeah, what lots of firms of accountants have got are separate teams of staff. One team work in the accounts production department, the other team works separately in the audit department. And if there are separate teams, that would imply separate staff members. That would reduce the threat of that self-review. If they can't reduce that self-review threat to a suitably low level, so if they haven't got the facility of separate teams and enough staff to spread it out, the only option to them for part 2 of F would be resign from the client. Well done, guys, if you said that. So F part 2, the only option if they can't reduce the self-review threat would be resign from the client. Okay, a couple more questions on ethics just to keep testing ourselves for this evening. So G, if an accountant is worried they may breach a fundamental ethical principle, state 3 sources they are allowed to contact for advice. So if you are concerned about something ethical, what 3 places could you go to get advice? The answers are on the screen. Have a think, which 3 places could you go to get advice about an ethical issue? Use the chat box. If you're playing at home, watching the recording, make a note of your answer, shout it out, have a think. But which of the pick list answers on the screen would be 3 places you could suitably go for ethical help and advice? Some answers coming through. So the first place you could go, and we can have these in any order, the first one I would have highlighted is an appropriate professional body. Well done. I can see Angela said that one. Susanna said their professional body. Well done, Liz, I can see as well. Heather got that one. Nice one, Heather. Shell got it in her answer. So yeah, the first one, an appropriate professional body. And that could be the AAT for you guys. Brilliant. The second place we could go, you would always have the ability of getting legal advice from a solicitor. So well done if you said another place we could go for advice is a solicitor or lawyer, get independent legal advice. So yeah, independent legal advice from a solicitor or a lawyer. The last one is an employer's helpline. If an employer, and lots of bigger employers have maybe got their own confidential helpline, a helpline for ethical help and advice, you could go for an employer's helpline. So well done for those 3 points of help: an employer's helpline, independent solicitor or lawyer for legal advice, and contacting an appropriate professional body. Well done if you got those 3. Right, on to question H for this evening's ethics slot. You discover your client has various errors in their tax affairs, which they are refusing to disclose to Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. So they are wanting to hide errors in their tax affairs. What would be a suitable course of action? Oh, so here are the potential options. What would we go for? What would we have to do if a client refuses to notify Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs of errors? I think this one is a bit misleading. I think guys that are saying a SAR for that, I agree with you. I think because we know this could potentially be tax evasion, and that's a criminal offence and would result in them retaining the proceeds of crime, you could file that on a suspicious activity report. The one that I would actually go for, and the one that the model answer says, is resign from the client. I think both of those are acceptable, and I don't believe they would have both of those in a simultaneous drop down for you. But if a client won't correct errors on their tax return, yep, if it does result in them having the proceeds of crime, should be referred to the money laundering reporting officer and a suspicious activity report filed with the National Crime Agency. The other thing always to remember is if a client won't correct errors and you feel they should do, that's a lack of their integrity. You should resign from that engagement to preserve your own professional, ethical reputation. So the model answer for that one says resign, but guys that have said suspicious activity report, I would also agree with you. H, you discover your client has various errors in their tax affairs. Oh, sorry, we've just done that one, haven't we? I, if you are forewarn your client that you are going to report them to the National Crime Agency, you may also be committing a crime. That crime is known as what? What do we call the criminal activity of actually forewarning your client that you are going to or have reported them? That's a more straightforward one. Well done, Shell, Susanna, Jenna, Raza, I can see. Heather's got that one right. Well done, Becky. Yeah, tipping off. Well done, Sunfair. Tipping off is what we call that criminal offence of informing a client we are going to or have reported them to the NCA for a suspicion of laundering money. Final question for our ethical slot for this evening. When reporting a suspicion of money laundering, what is the name of the document that it is used? So what document is a suspicion of money laundering reported to the National Crime Agency on? That one, guys, is the SAR. Well done, people listening to the recording at home, if you said SAR or suspicious activity report. That's an important standard form that tells the National Crime Agency what the suspicion is, who your suspicion is about, and where the suspicion is coming from, where they could go to investigate it further. Fantastic. So well done for part J if you said the report of suspicious activity is made on a SAR or suspicious activity report. Fantastic. Guys joining me live this evening, how do you feel about the ethics part? Has that been a good recap? Did you get most of those right? Is that boosting your confidence that some of those terms are sinking in? Becky saying all good. Loving that, Becky, with a smiley face. Well done. It's an important area, one that hopefully if you can spend a bit of time learning the terminology, learning the process that is in your study notes for the advanced level synoptic at level 3, hopefully that will do you well on the day of the assessment. Brilliant. But for the second part of this evening, we now turn pace. So for the second part of the slot, we're going to look at some spreadsheets and a particular spreadsheet task. So for this one, I need to open Excel. Bear with me 1 second. I'm just going to stop sharing for a sec and just reshare my screen with everybody. And I'm going to share my whole screen this time, because this time I'm going to have to flick between the task requirements and the Excel spreadsheet itself. If you are departing now, thank you for joining for the ethics part, and good luck if you are preparing for your assessment. But if you're staying for the spreadsheets part, we can now turn our attention to the Excel task for this week's revision session. So again, one of the challenges of the Excel assessment now, the spreadsheets assessment, which is separate to the synoptic, is you will be given instructions, but you've got to flick between the instructions document on the screen and the spreadsheet itself. So hopefully, can I just get a confirmation in the chat box? Can everybody currently see on their screen revision week 1 SPSH task? This is a 14-mark task. Is that visible? Can you also see, though, if I now flick over, can you see an Excel view on the screen now? Perfect, because this evening and in your assessment, you're going to have to get used to flicking between the two, doing the things on the Excel spreadsheet, but following the instructions that you need to follow for what to do. So I'm going to flick back over to the instructions. And it says, use the Excel workbook revision week 1. Well, that's what I just opened. I'll flick back to it. Revision week 1 is what it's called here. And remember, the workbook is the whole Excel file. So the whole Excel file is called a workbook. It then gives us a bit of context to the task. It says you have a trainee, a new trainee who is performing the inventory count. So a stock take, counting how much inventory is held at the end of the period. And you'll be reviewing their work. Where inventory is low, the supervisor will order stock from the manufacturer. So we are instructed, open the worksheet called Task 1, enter today's date as the header for the worksheet to record the supervisor's review. So if I now flick across to Excel, the worksheets are the individual tabs at the bottom here. So we've got one called Task 1 and we've got one called 1 Inventory. Well, we were asked to open the Task 1 worksheet, so that's the one I'm in, and insert a header with today's date. Now, there are a few ways in Excel you can insert headers, and you need to be comfortable with how you would do it for yourself. Remember, you can search up here as well in the versions of Excel in the exam, so you can use Excel to help you. The way I am going to do it, I am going to go into, well, there's a few ways I can go and do it. I'm actually going to go to, well, let's see, I can go to File, and I can go to Page Setup here. So I can do that through Print option and go into Page Setup. And in the Page Setup here, I can go to Header and Footer. There are other ways you can get to Page Setup, but in the Header and Footer, in the header, I can go to insert one that's a date. So there's a few different ways I can do that. But if we go to Custom Header, here in the center section, you might be asked to justify them to the left or to the right. But if you see there's one here with a little date icon, if it says and open square brackets, date, close square brackets, that will mean now it will display today's date at the top of the view. And so you can go that way. You can also go to view it a slightly different way. If you go to the view icon at the top, you can go here to page layout view. And again, that shows Excel not as a standard Excel view on the screen, but as a page as if it was being printed. And you can see there now it's showing the date. So I can do that here and I can change the headers here. That's a big thing to remember with Excel. There are usually more than one way that you can go to get to something, and they don't watch you do it. They will only assess you on the spreadsheet that's uploaded at the end. So however you are comfortable at going to insert a header and footer, it really doesn't matter. The key thing is you know a way to get there. So I'm going to go back to my normal view now and say we have done that first requirement. We have opened task 1. We have inserted a header called the date, and it will display today's date whenever that date might be that it's printed. Brilliant. I'll remind you, if you want to watch back, the recording for this will be sent out. You can go back and rewind and watch where I've gone on Excel to do it. But we need to move on. And that's a big thing you need to do in the exam for the assessment for spreadsheets. Keep going. Make sure you get through as much of the requirement as possible. They shouldn't be as time pressured as they once were. So try and do everything they ask for. Right. So now we are on to B. It says enter a heading in column F called quantity bracket supervisor. If you see anything in speech marks, all that means is just type it as text. So a heading in column F, quantity open brackets supervisor. So if I go back to my Excel view, here is column F. Use a bit of initiative. So you can see they've already got headings in column B, C, D, and E. So we need a heading in column F, quantity. So I'm just typing that into the cell, open brackets, supervisor, close brackets. And that has put me the heading in. If I go back to my instructions, it says in this column, perform the inventory count. Perform a count if function for each row product name using the inventory listing in tab 1 inventory. So this is probably, in my view anyway, the most technical part of this evening's task. In a separate worksheet down here, 1 inventory, we have got lots of product numbers, product codes, product names. And so you can see we've got multiple products of 1010, multiple products of 2020, etc. Now, they have asked us to use a count if function. So if I show you how to do this, my first rule is in any function, use the formula and then insert function feature of Excel, because that will allow you to type in the particular function they've asked for. Tonight, they've asked for count if, and you will see there in the select function, count if is one of them. So count if, the first thing you need to tell a count if function is the range of data you want it to count entries in. So the range, if I now click on the inventory worksheet and go down, and you could do this by the range of product number or product code, either would be acceptable because we are presuming they are unique. I'm going to do it on product number. I'm going to tell it the range of product numbers I want it to count if is from B3, that first line of product code, all the way down to cell B, and it keeps going and going and going in this inventory spreadsheet down to B164. So it's doing the product code as my range. Now the criteria, I want it to do it for specifically this row, product number B1010. So the criteria is I want it to equals cell B3. So hopefully it will count how many times, if I put criteria B3, it finds 1010 as a unique number in that range. If I hit OK, it's found it 10 times. Does that make sense, everybody? So what I'm telling it to do, you don't need to type in the full formula, but we can have a look at it. Equals count if open brackets, then the reference to our worksheet 1-inventory. So it's saying between B3 and B164, how many times does it find the unique number that's in B3? Let's do it again. Now, I'll show you a shortcut for doing it and copying it down in a moment, but let's have another go at that just so you can watch it again. This time, we want to know how many times can it find, count if it finds 2020 in that range of inventory. So I'm going to click in here again in my column F, this time in cell F4, insert function, count if again, the range. Well, actually, it's exactly the same range as we had last time. Our range is going to be all of the separate product numbers from the inventory count. So I'm going to scroll down from cell B3 all the way down again to cell B164. But this time the criteria is different. This time I want it to count if it finds product number 2020, which is cell B4. So if I hit OK, what Excel has automatically told me is it's found it 21 times, 21 separate 2020s within my inventory data. Now, I could manually keep going through that process for each of the continuing rows, but I can really speed myself up by copying that same COUNTIF function formula down to each of the rows for my separate product numbers. Now, the only thing I need to be careful if I'm going to copy down a formula is, do I want it as it comes down the rows to update the references to the individual cells? And what I need to do is say the range of inventory data is going to stay at B3 to B164, no matter which row of product number I'm looking for. Therefore, I need to make that absolute. Guys watching live tonight in the audience, who can tell me what symbol I use to make something absolute? How can I make a reference to a row or a column absolute in a formula or function? Exactly right, guys, the $sign. So what I'm going to do is $sign, and I don't actually have to do the B, but I can do. We're not going to scroll across and copy across for different columns. The important thing is the absolute is 3 to 164. No matter where I go down in my product numbers, the inventory data I want it to look in is going to remain B3 to B164. And if I didn't make it absolute, when I copied the formula down, every row I went further down, it would move each of those numbers one row on in a sequence. The one I don't want to make absolute, though, is what I am asking it to look for. Because as I copy that one down, I do want in the next row for it to look for whatever's in B5 and in the row below B6. So I only want to make the range absolute, not the unique thing I am asking it to look for. So I've made that absolute. If I now copy, so I highlight on the cell I want to copy, go to the bottom right and get the black crosshair. If I copy that down, it's now copied that formula down. And if I go and look in there, no matter where it's gone down, it's still, first of all, looking in the range B3 to B164. But as you'll notice, as I go down, the second reference, what it's looking for, is being updated, because for row 7, I want it to find how many times is that 5050 in B7 there found within the data set. Does that make sense, everybody? I think that's the most technical bit of tonight. That was a COUNTIF. So it wasn't just counting how many times, it was counting if it found that particular one. Brilliant. If you are uncomfortable with COUNTIF, go back and re-watch my how to find it. But a standard count will just count how many times something is there. So a count will just count how many were there in total. So it won't have a what are you counting for? It would just count how many separate rows were there with anything in. A COUNTIF is how many times if that particular thing is found. Perfect. Right, let's move on because we've got to keep pace with this evening. So we have done insert a COUNTIF function for each row product name using the inventory listing in tab 1. We're on to C. Using the if function, compare the trainee's inventory count to the supervisor inventory count, stating correct if they match and incorrect if they not. Input the answers in column G. So this is a different function of Excel now, an if formula. So I'm going to start here on row 3 and do it in cell G3. Again, my rule is for any function, go to formulas, go to insert function. And this time I'm going to search for an if function or formula. There it is in my list here. So I click on it. And now Excel opens up the little guide of, right, what exactly do I need to tell Excel to construct an if formula for me? Now, I've been asked to do a logical test. So my logical test is going to be, is the cell E3 equal to the cell F3? Because what we've been asked to do is find out, well, if the quantity from the trainee is equal to the quantity we have just calculated as the supervisor. Now, the second part of an if formula is what do you want Excel to display if that is true? If the quantity for the column E is the same as the quantity for column F, going back to our instructions, we were told use correct if they match. So if I go back to Excel, if true, I want it to display correct. And if I type correct in, because Excel knows that's text, it will then go and put it into speech marks. If, however, E3 doesn't equal F3, the quantities don't match, the instruction said incorrect. So if I go back now, if false and type incorrect, and again, Excel will then put it in speech marks. So as a little tester, E3 does equal EF. So in a moment, when I hit OK, it does display correct. Fantastic. Now for the next row down, we want to do it for E4 and F4. Now again, I can copy this function or formula down. Because I've not made anything absolute, if I copy that same function and formula down the individual rows, every row I copy it one down, it will update the number for that row to be E4 equals E5. So if I copy that down, there we go, it's copied. But now let's go back in and look at that function, that formula for row 4. You will see it's now copied down, equals if, open brackets, E4 equals F4. Well, here, E4 is 20, F4 is 21. That's not true, so it's not displaying correct. It's false, it's displaying incorrect. Do we see how that if formula or function works? If not, please go back to the recording. You can rewind, you can watch me doing that one again. But my big message there is try and get familiar with how you can use Excel to help you by using that insert function. You are not expected to learn how to construct those functions and formulas from scratch. You can use that insert function help to really help you think about the individual elements of some of those more sophisticated functions that they might ask for. We've got to keep moving on. We have just done part C. We've got D to do next. It says use conditional formatting on column G to highlight the whole cell in red if the stock is below 10 to identify where a new order is required. Right, if I go back to my spreadsheet, and you will see if I go to the home menu at the top here, one of the icons I've got now says conditional formatting. Now, the instruction said use conditional formatting in column G to highlight the whole cell red if the stock is below 10. So if I go back, find column G. Now I need to highlight, and let's just go back again. Conditional formatting on column G to highlight the whole cell in red if the stock is below 10 to identify where the new order is required. I think there is a typo there. I think this was really meant to say in column F, because I can't think I can do this conditional formatting in column G. I've got to highlight column F, in my view, to go conditional formatting. And then I want to go to highlight cell rules if, and it said if less than 10. And then I can tell it what to highlight. And so I am going to go to custom format, and then I can go to fill, and I can select red fill, and you can see it has highlighted. Okay. The two cells with quantities of less than 10 have been highlighted red, and that's Excel automatically doing that. If something changed in the spreadsheet and that number went to 10 or above, it would now not highlight in red. So apologies there. I think there's a typo there. Use conditional formatting in column G. I don't think we can do it in column G because column G doesn't contain numbers. It would have to be F to highlight the whole cell red if the stock is below 10 to identify where new orders are required. Does that make sense, everybody? Again, I would remind you, if you want to watch me do that again, you can go back and rewind the recording when you've got a copy of the recording. Let's move on to part E for this evening. It says in column F, row 13, use a formula to calculate the total inventory. So in column F, row 13. So here's column F, row 13 is here. We've got to use a formula to calculate the total. What's the best formula to use to add up a series range of numbers, anybody? Thank you, Susanna. Thank you, Justina. Yeah, auto sum or the sum function. So if I go to F13, I can go to formulas, and here we go, auto sum. And Excel will automatically look in the spreadsheet and think, well, which range of numbers is it most likely Ben wants to auto sum? Just correct if it doesn't go to the correct range. But here it's saying equal sum, open brackets, F3. Well, that's good. That's the quantity of our first product line. Down to F12, that's the quantity of the last product line. We should have got 162. And you can see that sum formula in there. So it's totaling up. We've got 162 separate pieces of inventory at the end of the period. And then finally, part F for this evening's spreadsheet task, it says format the inventory count table as follows. Draw borders around all cells. All columns must be center lined and headers must be in bold. So for the inventory count table, borders around all cells. Well, let's do that first. I am presuming we're starting at B2. You've got to use a bit of common sense in the exam. And so I'm going to go from B2 down to G13, highlighting all of those. I'm going to right click and I'm going to hit format cells. And one of the little tabs across the top here is border. And so I am going to put a border around the outside. And if I now hit OK to that, you will see that it has put a border around my little table of inventory. So that was highlight the cells that you want, go right click, format cells, and you can then select border and tell it where you want that border around the cells you have selected. It says around all cells. Now, you could dispute this, and this is where I wouldn't get too hung up on it, because the real assessors will be able to give credit. I have put a border around the outside. Technically, it says all cells. So having reread it, I'm going to highlight that again, go format cells. I put the borders around the outside. If I now click the border in the middle, going up vertically and across horizontally, if I now hit OK, you can see that it's actually put a border around every cell. And you're going to have to use a bit of initiative in the spreadsheets exams. The instructions might be a bit open to interpretation. You do what you feel makes sense for the task. Try and think, is that the sort of thing I would do if I was going to do this spreadsheet for my job role potentially, and use a bit of initiative, common sense to think, does that make sense? It says all cells must be center lined. So now I'm going to go back to my spreadsheet, highlight all of those cells again, and I can go home up here. And you can see in Excel, this is where we've got the justification. And the middle one here is center your contents. So I've highlighted all of the cells and I'm going to now center them. So the contents of all of the cells is now going to display in the center, not justified to the left or the right. And if I go finally back to my instructions, it says all headers must be in bold. So if I go back to my table, the headers are here. And I am going to now highlight those cells. Here's the bold for the font. You can see it's put all of the headers into bold. Does that make sense, everybody? I have followed those instructions. you would be asked at the start and as you go along to save your spreadsheet so it gets uploaded. But that is indicative of a first task of the new style spreadsheets assessment. As I say, it's one that's been written by us, my team of publishers at First Intuition. It's not the AAT sample assessment. Hopefully, that's given you a good overview and some confidence to say, I could do that. I think that the good news about the separation of spreadsheets now is students should have a bit more time, not the time pressure of the Synoptic exam for the old format. So thank you all for joining. Thank you for watching the recording. I've been Ben Bullman. Hopefully you found that session useful for your preparation for either the Synoptic assessment at level 3 or the new style spreadsheet assessment. I look forward to seeing you at a future revision session.